I'd like to call to order this September 9th meeting for the Urban Design Commission and begin with roll call.
Mark Kimmerer. Peter Brigg.
Here.
James Doherty. Juan Ania.
Here.
Douglas Gasek. Patrick Coleman.
Here.
Alan Kemplin.
Here.
Patricia Joyner. Here.
Would like a motion for the approval of the July meeting minutes. Is there any discussion on the minutes? Seeing no discussion, are there any objections to the approval of the minutes? Seeing no objections, the minutes are passed. Are there any disclosures for the agenda this evening? Seeing none, we'll move forward. There's nothing on the consent agenda, so we'll go on to nothing on unfinished business, move on to regular agenda for site landscape plan approval. Case number 2009-031, University of Alaska Facilities Planning and Construction for final landscape plan review on, this doesn't actually give a good name, for case 2009-031. Begin with the staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The University of Alaska Anchorage is requesting final site and landscape plan approval for a 10-acre site, which will have a phased development in PLI zone district. The first building under phase 1 would be a 3-story facility for a health sciences building, and I would point the commission to 2 handouts that that staff has provided. One is an excerpt from Anchorage 2020, the comprehensive plan, and the other is an email from the applicant to staff. The department recommends approval of this site and final landscape plan for the UAA Health Sciences Building, Phase 1, subject to conditions 1 through 3 on page 7 of the packet. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Are there any questions for staff? Seeing no questions for staff, would the petitioner care to make a presentation or answer questions as you wish?
We would like to take my name is Terry Fanfeld, speaking on behalf of the client UAA, and I'm with Land Design North. We are the subconsultant for landscape and site design for the UAA Health Sciences project. And we would like to take the opportunity to make a short presentation and to ask for some consideration under the recommendations if we could. This is our final presentation and final approval for the project. I would note that you can see on the recommendations from municipal staff that there are 3 recommendations that they've included. Recommendation number 1 we have no issues with. It's pretty much the standard that all of the improvements related to this approval will be substantially in compliance with the questionnaire narrative and the plans that were provided. And we agree wholeheartedly with that, have no issues there. Number 2 is states resolved with MOA non-motorized transport coordinator the walkway connection of the proposed Chester Creek Trail to the 10-foot wide asphalt path near the intersection. We would like to request that this recommendation or condition of approval be dropped from the conditions, and we do so because, in fact, such a meeting has been held. We met with Sharon Ferguson, the planning staff, and we met at the same time also with the municipal non-motorized transportation coordinator, Lori Skanke, and arrived at solution that was agreeable, and it's hard to try to use the mic and to be able to talk to the plan at the same time, but the plan on the left over there identifies where the issue is, and that's that from the Health Sciences Building, at the front of the building on the near side, we will be providing a pathway connection that goes down toward the intersection with Providence Drive. There's a new Chester Creek Trail that's in the planning stages by the municipality. They've already acquired the easement to do that and everything else. And so what we're proposing, we don't know when that's going to get constructed. We have no control over that. But what we have done and what we agreed to do at that meeting was to provide access from our building to where that trail will be and to the corner, which I think you can see on the plans is what we've done. Also, near that intersection is a new planned transit stop, which means that there's a lot of pedestrian interaction kind of happening at that location. And we've worked it into our plan. The one missing component right now, and what we don't know is when it will be constructed, is the Chester Creek Trail itself. And so we've done whatever we can as part of our project to coordinate that. So at this point, rather than go back and try to reschedule another meeting, when in fact we've already tackled this one, we would prefer to have that particular condition dropped from the recommendations. With regard to number 3, then, which states that provide public art in accordance with state statute 35.27, my understanding is that you have been provided with another document from Sharon Ferguson that identifies what the university systems program is, that they in fact their art program is independent from that particular state statute, and that the university intends to move forward with an art selection, but they'll do so in accordance with the requirements of the State Board of Regents, which is a different set of recommendations than the actual state statute. So I think that there are two options. One is we could ask that you simply drop number 3. The university does fully intend, and the chancellor has openly stated that they're going to incorporate art into this facility. So I think that's going to go forward. So it could be dropped. Or if you're not comfortable with that, might I suggest that as an alternative, that public art, that the project incorporate public art in accordance with the University of Alaska Regents policies, which I think would cover where we need to go with it as opposed to the state statute. With that, I would open it. I guess one of the other things, we're really here for final approval, for final landscape approval, and none of the recommendations really touch on that. But we did make modifications to the plans based on your recommendations at our preliminary hearing with regard to some of the hard surface areas, the location of paving around some of the doorways, and a variety of other things. But I would point out that the University of Alaska has a terrific, this is one of those projects where the landscape that goes in is going to look great years from now because they've got a terrific grounds maintenance group, and unlike so many of the projects we work on that incorporate landscape, this is one where the maintenance will really be there, and that's what ultimately makes the landscape portions of the project, I think, shine. So with that, I thank you for your time, and I'm open to any questions you might have.
Are there any questions for the petitioner? I think our software has changed, so is there still the button with the list, or how does this work now? Sorry, yeah, we've got an upgrade. There we go.
So much easier to raise your hand.
Commissioner Joyner.
I might have missed it, but could you just explain a little of what the Regents policy is for art? I mean, does it have a percentage or a dollar amount, or just how does that work?
It does. I'm not entirely familiar with it, but what it does is it says that they will budget 1%, if I'm not mistaken, on that. And I think that if I think you could incorporate the language that they'll apply by the regents, but I think that if you look around at recent projects that the university has done, virtually all of them have incorporated public art. I don't know what the total value is. I know they try to budget 1% for the art projects. I also know that when the time comes that our project actually goes in for permitting, it's a difficult thing to identify that you've actually met some percentage requirement because the art committee gets selected about the same time that you're starting to move forward with actually constructing the building. So when that goes on, some portion of the art will end up perhaps being on the site, and larger portions likely to happen on the interior of the building. And then other ones that worked on, that's how it worked. But until the building's almost well into construction, the actual placement and selection of art is often still unknown. I don't know that I really answered your question very well.
Let me answer that a little bit.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Paul Doherty. I'm with Livingston Sloan Architects. We're the architectural firm lead on the project. And within, I believe, the packets that you received on page 10, there's an email from Chris Terlettis with the university to Sharon Ferguson, where he's actually cut and pasted the policy regarding art in their facilities.
I thought I remembered, but I didn't remember the details of it.
Well, it's certainly not as lengthy as the state statute. You know, I don't see that it says a specific percentage, but it does require that they include an identified amount in their budgets. That amount is outside of the construction budget, and unfortunately, Chris Terlettis was unable to be here tonight. But we do know that it exists within the budget. Okay. But I'm not sure what the dollar amount actually is.
I was just curious if it was closely related to that, so that there was some amount, so that it wasn't just a token piece of art, although I recognize the university has quite a bit of art. Then I have one other question. Because I believe has the site been cleared?
Yes, it has.
Oh, okay. Too late. I was curious if there are opportunities to salvage or have a contractor salvage or use firewood or something so that you might recover some of what was on the site already. But
Any other questions? Seeing none, I have two. So just for clarification for the Chester Creek connection, so you're doing off-site improvements that will take sidewalk up to the corner?
There'll be asphalt paving that goes up to the corner, if I'm not mistaken. It's not sidewalk, but it's consistent with what the other trails are at that location.
Okay. So it's not just building out and in the future they will come?
No.
Okay. And then just out of curiosity, I know that the last time, if memory serves, we had a discussion on the black spruce. In your looking at the densata variety, just curious from a plant point of view, do you feel that was a positive or a negative, or what did you come to in your consideration of that?
I don't know that this project actually touched on black spruce.
Or was it not the...
It was might have been white spruce.
The white spruce, but with the densata cultivar, or was that?
I think what we were trying to, what we were presenting was that we would like to utilize the white spruce where possible, just simply because even though it sometimes has a thinner appearance than Colorado spruce or green spruce, it has a much higher likelihood of actually surviving up here.
And within, we received some notes that had outlined the original recommendations, the 10 recommendations, I think, with your responses in red on them. So the note for the black spruce was white spruce should be specified as Black Hills densata, and as noted as change is requested in the planting plan. So was that change made?
No, that has not changed. And what we're proposing there is because within Title 21, within our own municipal requirements, there's a height to width ratio on the trees. And we're trying to come up with a plant that actually meets the meets all the criteria and is still hardy. So the Black Hills spruce, when you mentioned black spruce, I was thinking of our typical Dr. Seuss trees, but the Black Hills variety of the white spruce has a denser foliage with a broader width to height ratio, which is what...
That is the one you went with then?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I was wondering if you had any editorial for moving.
No, we're just trying to find a good solution here, so.
Thank you. That's all of my questions. Are there any other questions then? Seeing no question, we'll entertain a motion for approval. Oh. Question, Francis?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not able to request to speak for some reason, but I wanted to address some of the things that the petitioner said. This is, according to the document, final site plan and landscape approval. So it would not only be landscaping. You're also dealing with the site plan. Also, staff does not support the removal or modification of condition 2 or 3. In regards to condition 2, what would happen if approved as is, the petitioner would have to fulfill this condition by getting a signature or initials from Lori Skanke, the non-motorized transportation coordinator. Certainly there was a meeting held. I wasn't present. I wasn't aware of it. I don't know that that's been reflected on any plans that we have in our file. It may just be a technicality. I'm sure it is. However, I don't see the reason to remove it at this point. I don't believe that it inconveniences the applicant too terribly much. In regards to condition 3, providing a percent for art is a requirement of Anchorage 2020. I wasn't involved in all this research about the university's policies. All I can tell you is that it's required by the UMed plan and it's required by the comp plan. If you look at page 10 of the packet, the Associate Vice Chancellor, Chris Turletz, I don't know how to pronounce his name, he says, I think in the third sentence, we do have an art line item in the project budget. Here at UAA, we have used the arts fund for the building itself. So that is to say that the university is required by its own policies to have a line item for art. They just don't spend it on the art. I don't, all I can say is that Anchorage 2020 and the UMed plan, those policies require the percent for art. That's the requirement. That's all I have.
Question for the petitioner then, and follow-up for that for Department Recommendation number 2. Would you object to rewording number 2 to being more of a formalize the coordination agreement rather than saying resolve? If it's already been resolved, I'd like to be more accurate. Just say that to sign something or...
Well, I think that the staff retort here is a little misleading in a sense that it's never as simple as going and get somebody's initials. So my sense on it is I would like to just ask that it be removed as a condition. We literally did sit down with Sharon Ferguson from planning and with Larry Skanke. We've done this. We did exactly what this says right here. And we have resolved it. It is on our plans right now. That's the final plans that we've submitted and we will abide by in going forward to get final approval, which is why it's a little frustrating from our side of it. But that's the circumstances, and that's why we request that be removed at this time as a condition.
So to follow up for that then, for number 2, in your experience with similar coordination activities, what is a typical way of formalizing it? Or is generally the meeting and the coordination everybody nodding their head enough?
We're just going to be, it is in a sense already coordinated in that we've now submitted it, we've drawn it the way that they've asked us to do it. We coordinated with the consultant company that actually is doing the Chester Creek Trail to ensure we have the trail in the right location. And we've provided the access to the corner. It's going to be submitted again for approval in the end. So the fact that we're resubmitting at that time actually, in my opinion at least, covers that in its entirety. So our preference would be to remove it. Alternatively, if you leave it in where it is now, we'll simply jump through the hoops and try to make the coordination effort with all the parties again.
A question for staff. If we leave this in, essentially it does just create a little bit of a cyclical effort. If we do pull this and approve it without recommendation number 2, we're essentially saying that we are approving this plan with that agreed upon coordination as shown to us. So I think that by our approval, it is giving it a stamp of approval.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If condition number 2 is removed, then Mr. Schoenthal will, revise the plans according to the meeting that he had. And
They already have them. That's what's submitted in this package.
So by what we're approving, it is the...
I'm sorry, Terry, you're saying that what I have in front of me is has addressed this? I guess I'm surprised.
No, let me hand you one that actually has that on. And if this is different from what's in front of you, then I agree.
And the one we're looking at is a plan dated September 1st, 2009. I'm assuming that is the most recent.
What I was going to say was that what would happen is if his plans are different from the ones I have in front of me, when he wants to apply for a building permit, the applicant will come to the planning counter, provide the resolution, which would say conditions 1 and only 3, and then the plan reviewer would stamp it, and as long as it had a signature next to number 3, and then it would be added to the file. A copy would be given to the applicant. He would take that for a building permit. He would begin. He would apply for the building permit. The purpose of the condition is to make sure that what is resolved. I don't believe that anything's cyclical as far as that. What Mr. Schoenthal has just handed to me is different from what I have, and it seems to me that condition speaks to having, the different plan. I mean, we can take it on faith that Mr. Schoenthal will provide the revised plan. I'm sure that that's his intention, but that's just, I guess, the bureaucratic step is to have the condition requiring it.
I'm confused now, I guess. So we're speaking to the same thing. I'm looking at a sheet L103 that has an issue date in the lower right-hand corner, September 1st, 2009.
There's a slight change to that, actually, in the plan that I just gave him. So under those circumstances, we will accept item number 2.
And I guess from a semantic point of view, if it has already been resolved, I don't necessarily like the wording of this implying that you haven't resolved it. So is there a better wording about final coordination, complete final coordination?
I think the petitioner will submit plans in accordance with resolution between MOA, non-motorized transportation coordinator, and municipal planning department.
And does that meet staff concerns?
Staff concurs.
Okay, thank you very much. And then relating to staff's comment for item number 3, I guess a question for staff is if UAA already has precedent of having their own 1% for art policy and is not required to do that in accordance with the Alaska statute. I don't know how that then ties in with UMed plans or with Anchorage 2020. So if staff has more enlightenment, or if I see that UAA has representation here now as well, so if they would wish to speak to it a bit further.
Sure. The Planning Department acts in accordance and is bound by Title 21, the Land Use Code, and within it, and part and parcel of it, are all adopted plans by the Assembly. That's the Trails Plan has been adopted by the Assembly. The UMed Plan has been adopted by the Assembly. Anchorage 2020 has been adopted by the Assembly. And those are the guiding principles for which those are the adopted policies. And the adopted policy for all public buildings is percent for art. An example would be the crime lab, scientific crime lab south of the Tudor. I think that the Commission looked at just the landscape for that last year. It was a requirement for them to meet percent for art, and that was included in the plans. I have really nothing. The Planning Department wouldn't have anything to say in regards to a state statute or the university's individual policies. I just read to you from an email from the Vice Chancellor, Associate Vice Chancellor, saying that the UAA does not. UAA has a line item for art, which it uses on the building itself.
Good evening. I am the Vice Chancellor, Associate Vice Chancellor Christolotes. What the email said is we try to comply with the spirit of 1% for art. We do budget for art, and frequently, not all the time, if you've been on campus, you know we have quite an array of public art on campus. Sometimes it does go to the building, which our Regents policy allows. So we are budgeting for art. Chancellor Holmer has asked us to be more rigorous in that regard, and it's in the budget now, 1% for art. In the end, if we need a simulation lab or 1% for art in the health sciences building, we'll fight that hard in both courts. And what can come out of it is we can get the simulation lab over the art, or we could get the art over the simulation lab. But it'd be the intent of our policy is to accommodate as best we can, I guess, and we do have it in the budget line for the project.
For recommendation number 3, then, if we struck the reference to Alaska statute and replaced it with reference to UAA P05.12.100, art university facilities and space, at least to reference the university's guidelines?
Yes,
Would that be acceptable to the petitioner?
it would.
Commissioner Anya?
Three drawings and 102, yes, correct. 1 minute and maybe there was September 12th, and the one you gave start the difference of September 12th was the same. That one you give
The one that I gave him is an updated piece that deals strictly with the trail connection. That was what has been presented on the plan that you just saw.
Yeah, that one, I want to know which drawing are we approving, because we don't, it's different from our package.
So we have a September 1st plan. If you could just point out the differences.
The other one, different.
If you could point out the differences between the most recent and the September 1st.
Okay, this one represents the one the most recent one.
But there's different.
Which, from a trail point of view, appears to be identical to the September 1st. Do you want to have a look at this? We would just like to know if there's any substantial differences between them.
That is the same plan.
This represents the changes we made post-meeting.
Perfect. So the September 1st plan is what we're approving, and that represents, so if the September 1st plan, sorry to belabor this, the September 1st plan that is in front of us would fulfill our reworded recommendation number 2, in that the petitioner will submit plans in accordance with coordination. This plan is in accordance with coordination. So I guess I would revisit that and ask staff if this September 1st plan we have in front of us is the latest and greatest. Does that satisfy your concerns?
I really can't speak to that. The staff person who was in charge of this did not convey anything to me about removing a condition.
Okay, so if it's fine with the petitioner, we'll leave it as stated as a petitioner will submit plans in accordance with that.
And we don't have an issue with that.
Are there any additional questions?
Yeah, I have another one. If we remove question number 3, are we in compliance with Title 21? If we remove this condition number 3,
We're not requesting the removal of condition. We're requesting the modification of number 3.
okay, we modify as it is, are we going to be in compliance with Title 21 or not?
Through the chair, Mr. Ania, yeah, I mean, the Anchorage 2020 says that public buildings must have % for art, or it doesn't say must have, it's a guiding principle or a strategy of Anchorage 2020. And the UMed plan calls for art in public institutions. The modification, staff really doesn't have any guidance on the modification requested by the petitioner. I apologize.
Any further questions? Seeing none, we'll call for a motion for approval. Thank you, Commissioner Joyner.
I move for approval of case 2009-031, final site and landscape plan review for the University of Alaska Anchorage Health Sciences Building Phase 1 as meeting the Title 21's conditions for the development of this site with staff recommendation 1 as written, 2, ensure that final plans submitted show the connection to the Chester Creek Trail as agreed to between the petitioner and staff, and 3, and condition 3 as written.
Seconded by Commissioner Coleman. For discussion with the petitioner for number 3, we had offered a substitution instead of the Alaska statute for the
It's not my
UAA.
motion.
Okay. Any discussion? I guess it would just a question for the clarification between the UA policy and the statute being left in that.
Well, I don't see a good reason to have different standards for different state buildings. Other state buildings do that, and they all could find other things to spend the money on. That's the reason for the 1%. And I suppose they can resolve it another way, but as far as our responsibilities, I think it's to meet the municipal requirements. And other state buildings and facilities are meeting that 1%, and I'd like to see the university do that if they have a clear policy that they're going to, and we knew for sure it might be different, but I would rather stay with the municipal regulations on that.
I guess my question on that is, my understanding is that from a policy point of view is that UA has a policy that is outside the state statute. So if that's already set as being a precedent, I'm not certain whether it's in our purview to request that they're in accordance with something that they are stating via email or their own. They've had permission to do that, essentially, I guess.
They evidently haven't from the municipality, and when it's not clear, I think we're better off to follow the municipal guidelines for this than to adopt different policies for different state facilities.
And I guess my question is whether we're imposing something that is outside of their normal.
I don't think UDC is. I think Title 21 and the UMed plan may be, but that would be a different venue to address that, I think.
Then I would question the wording is saying provide public art in accordance with. By doing that, we are imposing it upon them. So perhaps there's a parallel wording in order to maintain that level.
That meets Title 21 requirements and UMed policy.
And I'm certain.
I'd welcome if someone has a different amendment to that.
Commissioner Coleman?
I'm wondering if we can't make a friendly amendment and rather than require them to follow a policy that they're apparently not required to follow, if we, and since they do have a track record of providing public art in their buildings and seem committed to do so, with this one to make it in accordance with the UAA region's policy on public art.
Mr. Chairman, the university appears to have a spotty record of being able to meet the the policy, and it seems that in order for the the university, when they're making their priorities, I think it's important for them to receive guidance from the the local community as to what's important, and the UMed plan and the goals of Title 21 and the Urban Design Commission accepting staff recommendations helps provide that guidance to the university, to this public institution, as to how they should prioritize their expenditures. And from what I can see, in terms of the public will as articulated in our planning documents, and that we as an Urban Design Commission are beholden to try to implement, it is to provide as much guidance as possible to the state institution that yes, indeed, the 1% for art should be a priority when looking at allocation of scarce resources.
And I don't think there's any argument that we feel that is required, and mine is just a policy question, so it's outside of protocol, but I guess if I could request Mr. Terlides perhaps to explain the state statute versus the UAA policy.
The state statute gives some entities the state flexibility to write their own policy regarding construction in our instance and other things. So the Board of Regents has written the policy for facilities, which includes the procurement of art for construction. Again, the policy says we're going to comply. Don't have the actual wording with me. I think it was in what the staff had read earlier. But our intent is to meet the state statute requirements as best we can, or in those words. So there's we do budget for it. I guess we intend to put it in this building. The concern is we're not subordinate to the state statute. We're subordinate to the UA policy, and the rest of it is fine as long as we're compliant with our own policy plus the municipal requirements. Not the state statute, UA policy.
And there still is a friendly amendment on the table, I believe, from Commissioner Coleman regarding, and just clarify me if I'm wrong, changing up the Alaska statute for the UAA policy within the wording of the motion. Commissioner Joyner? No? Okay. guess I'm personally uncertain because it is imposing a different level of it's something that is outside of their own normal practice procedures. And per page 10, the email aside, there is a policy written on that page, the P05.12.100. And I guess the question is whether we feel that policy, as it is written here, meets our concerns or our intent. If it does, then we are asking them to provide public art in accordance with that. It's not necessarily giving weight to any statement they say that they do use those funds for construction or not. We are saying they provide public art in accordance with their own terms. So I guess that would just be my statement on it. Otherwise, the friendly amendment was not accepted. We have a motion on the table with department recommendations 1 through 3 with a modification for number 2. Is there any other discussion on the public art component to this? Seeing no other discussion. I guess I personally see there as being a conflict in this, and that they do have a policy that said has been in practice before. So I'm not certain that I can support the motion because it is imposing something on them that while perhaps just semantics is going outside of the normal operating procedure. So that would be my discussion on it. Commissioner Coleman?
Well, I supported the motion to get it on the floor and with the intent of offering a friendly amendment, but since that wasn't accepted, then we would vote on the existing motion and see what happens, and then of course another motion can be made if that fails.
And for protocol, we actually do not have a seconder on this motion yet.
No, we do.
We do?
We
did. I'm sorry.
It.
I'm looking at the screen that's wrong. That's right, you did. So is there any further discussion, or shall we vote on this motion?
Call the question.
Start voting. The motion is passed 3-2. So as a reiteration of that, a final approval is given with department recommendations number 1, 2, and 3 with the modifications to number 2, but number 3 stands as it's written with staff recommendations. We always break protocol, so it's very Mr. Schoenthal.
I think that with two dissenting or non-passing on the motion, and only 5 being present, my understanding is that the motion fails.
That is correct. There has to be 5 unanimous votes for anything. If you choose to vote on the friendly amendment, you can do that. And if that fails, you could go back to the original motion. But I'm thoroughly confused by that vote. You have to have 5 unanimous votes for anything to pass.
Okay. With that said, can we reverse time briefly, or are we going to stick with this? There's nods of heads.
I believe it failed.
Okay. Technicality aside, it has failed. We're moving back in time.
Mr. Chair, I agree with Commissioner Joyner suggests that we have a new motion since the original motion failed. Let's have a new motion and begin again.
Is that within our purview then?
Yes, the motion failed. There should be a new motion.
Okay.
A new friendly amendment, if there is to be one. There could be discussion after the motion is made, a positive motion.
So while that motion has failed, we have the opportunity for another motion where we won't make technical mistakes, perhaps, myself. So entertain a motion. What is your motion, Commissioner Coleman?
Well, we know the case. It would be the same as Ms. Joyner's motion, with the exception of number 3. I would make that subject to the Board of Regents, UAA Regents, policy on public art in their buildings.
And a technical question for staff or helper is, we have a motion that failed. Does anything within this motion need to recognize that? So how do we countermand a failed?
No, it does not. A new motion can...
Oh, it's just been voted. Okay. Thank you. My confusion. So we have a motion on the table. Do we have a second? If there's not a seconder, then the motion does not move forward. That did not move forward. I guess I would ask then for another motion that might achieve a seconder or Mr. McLaughlin. Okay, once again. And there was a frantically waving hand.
Our intent is to comply with the UAA policy to support 1% for art. So as we'll accept the number 3 as written. Alaska statute doesn't apply to us was the intent to correct. But 1% for art is in our budget and we intend to deliver it. Thank you. We're extremely excited about this project in follow-on phases. Certainly don't intend to jeopardize it by 1% for not for art. So 1% for art is our intent. Thank you.
Thank you for the comment. We'll ask for a motion for approval.
Need a motion.
We need a motion.
Yeah. I'll make a little different motion. Do I need to state my motion again up to number 3? I move for approval of case 2009-031, final site and landscape plan review for the University of Alaska Anchorage Health Sciences Building Phase 1 as meeting the requirements of Title 21 with staff recommendation 1 as written, staff recommendation 2 changed to read, ensure that final plans submitted show the connection to the Chester Creek Trail. or proposed Chester Creek Trail. And 3, provide public art for the building at 1%. Let's see. I'm thinking how to say this. Provide public art in accordance with UAA Regents policies, ensuring that 1% is invested in art for the facility. Did you get that? Provide public art in accordance with UA Regents policies, ensuring that 1% of construction costs are used for art in the new facility.
And my question, speaking from ignorance of the actual 1% state policy, does it require a...
The petitioner says that's not a problem, and that's what I wanted to say.
No, my question is, does it mean actual 1% of construction costs, or are there other...
What does the statute say?
That I don't know. The petitioner agreed to number 3 as written.
He said 1%. So I'm saying 1%. As all our every elementary school, every parking garage, every lab, every other state facility spends 1%. I think they intend to do that in this building, and I think that's a policy we should maintain. I don't think it's burdensome.
And I don't disagree with that. My only question is that my understanding what the petitioner just said was they agreed to the recommendations per number 3. By us putting 1% in, if that program has a different, if 1% is not truly an economic 1% per that program?
No, I want it to be 1%.
Then I guess for my comfort from the petitioner, is that the intent?
We don't need to carry on the discussion any further, I don't believe. I believe we can vote on that.
I guess I'm not comfortable with that because my understanding what the petitioner just said was that they would agree with number 3 per what we have written here. My concern is by putting 1% into that, it becomes 1%. And I don't know how 1% for art works, whether it's a cap of 100,000. I think that I don't know that. So by that, we could be instituting actually a higher monetary requirement than other similar projects. And if somebody has an answer for that, or staff, I guess that would reassure me. Is it 1%?
I could restate it to say to meet the same financial requirements as state statute for 1% for art.
Perfect. Thank you. I just get worried when they're percentages.
Does the seconder agree with the change in the motion? Let it reflect that the seconder supports the revised wording.
Any other discussion? Seeing no other discussion, call for a vote. All in favor, the motion passes. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
That completes our regular agenda. Staff, are there any public hearings, appearance requests, anything else that is not on this agenda? Or are there any staff reports? I guess we're good. I guess then, do we have a motion for adjournment? So moved by Commissioner Anya. Oh, there's move to adjourn doesn't require a second. My rough knowledge.
Well, that was great.